Mark Andrews and TJ Hockenson have the potential to be the tight end 1 overall or big bust in 2025. We talked through the top 6 toughest tight ends to rank on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, and when I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy betting and the 2025 draft at sportingnews.com.
This week, we have been going through all of the toughest players to rank at each position, and we have one position left at tight end. If you missed the other ones, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, go back and listen to those. We did it throughout the week. But with tight ends, there's some tough decisions we have to make when we're doing our rankings, and it starts right there with Mark Andrews, who is very, very confusing last year. He is right now sitting as the consensus tight end 5 or 6, depending on where you're looking. He and TJ Hockenson are pretty much going neck to neck here with making that decision with who you want to go with. But Andrews was the tight end 5 in fantasy points last year, tight end 7, though, in average points per game. So that was a drop off from what we're used to from him with tight end 4 in 2023, tight end 3 in 2022, tight end 1 overall in 2021. So we've seen him have these absolute huge years, and last year was just a big disappointment overall because it was inconsistent. But I will say after the really, really rough start from weeks 1 through 5, he did start to come along, but it was heavily, heavily dependent on those 11 receiving touchdowns he had last year. Without those, I mean, his targets were down, his playing time was down. So what are your feelings on Mark Andrews?
Yeah, the touchdowns have helped him before. The year that he finished ahead of Travis Kelce just a couple of years ago as the tight end 1, where touchdowns were a big part of that. He had that one blow-up game and the loss to the Raiders and had multiple touchdowns in that one. So he is a big red zone threat, and it does help when your quarterback is throwing 40-plus touchdowns and really doesn't have a lot in the receiving core to go and get some points. And look, they were able to sustain Isaiah Likely, too, for some usage in fantasy. I mean, he was the guy that came out of the gate staying hot here. So, look, Mark Andrews is a venerable guy, very productive, but it's still a bit of a changing of the guard, right? When you look at some of the people like in the mix, I mean, George Kittle has kind of reestablished himself there. He's one of those older tight ends that have kind of gotten better because of his quarterback situation. And then you look the rest: Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, Sam Laporta. Those would be the guys that are kind of the young generation leading things forward here. So right there, I mean, where do you fit him behind all those guys, right? I mean, you have to start right where we're at here. And a lot of the rankings have him there at tight end 5 through 7. Now he's exactly at 6. So when we're looking at Andrews again, I don't know if you're going to get much value from him, okay? You're not going to get a higher ceiling than that. You're probably not going to get a lower floor than that. So it's really not a value tight end that you're looking at. And he's getting up there, getting older. They do have a lot of weapons in the passing game. So if he has any touchdown regression, you're going to be a bit disappointed in him.
Yeah, you definitely will. And he is used near the end zone a lot, right? And even the year prior when he only played 10 games, he already had 6 receiving touchdowns in those 10 games. But he did have seasons with 5 touchdowns in 2022, with 7 in 2020. That was after a 10 touchdown year in 2019. So if those touchdowns come down to 5 to 7, you're going to be massively disappointed, right? And that ranking is going to change pretty drastically from just a couple touchdowns here and there, because even when you look at his fantasy numbers from week 6 through 18, it looks really good. He averaged 12 fantasy points per game during that span. It was just a really bad weeks 1 through 5. But again, all 11 touchdowns came during that span. He was only averaging 46 receiving yards per game and 4.6 targets per game in that span. He didn't have a single game with over 70 receiving yards last year. And Isaiah Likely was taking a lot of his snaps, a lot of his targets. We saw how the season ended in the playoffs with Mark Andrews, right? Him dropping that 2-point conversion. So that is also a big part of this. Maybe they give Isaiah Likely more run next year. And Andrews is turning 30 years old as soon as the season starts. So it definitely makes all of those things very hard to rank. And I do think I'll be staying away in the draft. Now, TJ Hockenson, he's right. He's ranked pretty much right around him between that 5, 6, 7 range in consensus. Still only somehow 27 years old. tight end 18 in points per game in 2024, 10 games played because he was recovering from the ACL tear in 2023. But in the 2023 season, he was the tight end 3 in points per game and tight end 4 in 2022. The questions coming from him is he's got another new quarterback and JJ McCarthy. Will Hockenson be the second or third target in this Vikings offense behind obviously Justin Jefferson, but will he be ahead of Jordan Addison in targets, or will he be that third target guy? And then just how many touchdowns will there be to go around, because he had 0 last year coming off that torn ACL. So definitely some question marks around Hockenson, but if he can feel really much better a year removed from the ACL tear, I do think he'll be a nice value.
Yeah, last year, I mean, this is a tremendous jump for him because last year he was tight end 17, 18 in that range in the average scoring. And we know part of it was coming back from injury, working with a new quarterback, and just getting reintroduced to the system and getting on the same page there. So when you look at Hockenson again, he's a very talented tight end. That's why they made a intra-division trade to get him, right? So they wanted him to be a key target. And we thought maybe the pivot to JJ McCarthy would help him quite a bit here because, again, it's a essential rookie quarterback's first-year starter, and maybe trusting the tight end a little bit more so than maybe Jordan Addison, being able to get him the ball downfield. So a little bit more reliance on Hockenson. So I think right now I'm a little bit disappointed because people have been aggressive to put him at tight end 5 already. I mean, I thought he would be lower based on last year's production, that everyone said, okay, he wasn't all that effective, so we need to push him down. But he's, again, back in a big role. So, again, I think what it says to me is this middle of the tight ends, I mean, tight end 5, tight end 6, that's the rounds to avoid this position and go in a different direction. I think it can wait till later to get some good values or jump on one early, such as a Kittle or Bowers or McBride, right? And then you're in better shape than this. So that's what it says. I think I want to stay away from both, and that's why they're hard to rank. Again, I think they can have top 12 production. I just don't know where it'll be. It could be near the top. It could be in the 10 to 12 in the end.
Yeah, it really could be. And I will say it's optimistic to see his targets last year in this offense. Even when he came back in week 9, but week 9 and 10, he was, or week 9 through 11, honestly, he was very limited in snaps, under 50% in all of those. It went up as the year went on, but he still had 62 targets last year in 10 games played. And again, with 3 of those being limited, that was tied for the third most targets on the team, despite missing all that time, and only about 30 targets away from Jordan Addison. So I will not be shocked if he's the second target on this team, which will obviously give him a much higher ceiling than if he's the third target. But I do think JJ McCarthy will need to lean on his big tight end over the middle. And I'm excited to see what he could do. But it is hard to rank him over the, Bowers, Kittle, Laporta, or McBride, those 4 guys. But I do think it's fair to have him around tight end 5. And I do think he could finish higher than that, but also he could just completely disappoint us next year as well. We have 4 more tight ends to discuss that are tough to rank for next year. We'll get into that right after a quick break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Nissan, and it's the Armada Player of the Week time. It's brought to you by our friends at Nissan with the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're going to take a look at the top draft prospects for fantasy and pick one guy who stands apart, the guy who we believe showcased the strength and power needed to push our fantasy teams forward as we look ahead to next season. There's only one choice. This week's Armada and clear-cut player of the week is Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise State. Now, he's sleek. He's compact. He can get to high speeds very quickly. He's going to last. He's durable for you. So we know whatever team gets him, is it the Raiders or the Cowboys, they are going to benefit greatly from a guy who can stay on the field and give them maximum engine and just rev them up entirely offensively. So excited about that. He's a guy that can handle a heavy load, can conquer everything with capability and confidence, and you can dream big. Your team can dream big of having him in your lineup next week or next year. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer. That's exactly what I think Ashton Genty can do here. It's clear that our player, Ashton Genty, is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop at nissanusa.com. That's nissanusa.com. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show and look at a couple more tight ends. And these guys' names always confuse me. They're always hard to rank. But now one has a new team. One is getting yet another new quarterback here. So so is the guy changing teams. But look at Evan Engram is the first guy. He's down to tight end 10 as he transitions, released by the Jaguars, picked up quickly by the Broncos, who had a use for a tight end and a need there for Bo Nix in year 2. Now, I think of all the spots, this was pretty good here for Evan Engram.
Yeah, it's a really good landing spot for him. And I do think the tight end 10 consensus ranking is probably fair. He was tight end 16 in points per game last season, only played 9 games. He was injured for most of it. We saw his 2023 season as the tight end 2 overall, right? The tight end 6 on average, but that was with 143 targets. I don't think he's going to get that in this Broncos offense. However, I do think he can be the second target in this offense behind Courtland Sutton, because their second target last year was Javonte Williams. A, he's gone, and B, that should have never been the case, right? They needed another guy. Engram it can be that second weapon for them. Ingram's biggest issue throughout his career has been the touchdowns, right? He's never scored more than 6, and that was his rookie year that he scored 6. The rest of that has been 4 or under. So that's always been his biggest issue. But now that he's changing teams, will that change with Sean Payton and Bo Nix? Maybe. But yeah, I don't know. It would be really easy to rank him if he was still with the Jags, right? We would have him pretty low. But with the Broncos and with the change with Sean Payton wanting that Joker role, he's been talking him up, right? Could he finish higher than that? Could he get over 100 targets next year? It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, let's wait and see what they do in the draft. Now, they do have some receivers on their roster. We know they've teased us a little bit with Troy Franklin, Bo Nix's old college teammate at Oregon. You have Marvin Mims and some of these dudes that have flash, but nothing that has stuck here opposite Courtland Sutton since they moved on from Jerry Jeudy. So this could be the Jeudy role, right? And this offense that they need that complementary inside receiver. Engram, to me, already looks a lot like the part of a wide receiver tight end hybrid where he can work the middle of the field. Courtland Sutton is his best using his size, speed on the outside to stretch the field for Bo Nix. We'll see what they do at running back, but right now they need to find somebody that is capable of catching passes there. Again, there's a void at that second, third, fourth receiver in terms of having a reliable guy. So the opportunity is definitely knocking for Engram to take advantage of that. Also, young quarterback in his own right in Bo Nix in year 2, so you'd think you'd lean on him a little bit more if Sutton's covered. So I think it's a great landing spot, really, in the end. I mean, we really were excited with the Broncos here. It's even better than they say he went to the Chargers because they actually have a little bit more receiving juice on that team at this point. So, I like it. Tight end 10, I think, is a little low. I think he's more in the 6 to 8 range is more where I would want to target Evan Engram because, again, he's going to be all over the field deployed quite a bit here by Peyton and Lombardi here for what the skill set of Bo Nix calls for.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that he's quite a few spots below Jonnu Smith. I do think that they're pretty similar in the way, right? In a way that they their skill set. But I won't be surprised if Engram has more targets than Jonnu Smith next year. So I think I would personally like to flip those with Engram being tight end 8 and Jonnu Smith being tight end 10. I think I like that better. The next guy that's super tough to rank is David Njoku. Because his offense is just a mess. His team is just a mess. But his consensus ranking is tight end 8 right now. He was tight end 5 in average points per game last year at 10.9 points per game, only 11 games played. He was injured in week 1, missed weeks 2 through 4, slow to come back in weeks 5 and 6, but week 7 through 16, they were really great. 12.8 points per game. That's more than what Brock Bowers averaged last year. But he had Jameis Winston for a lot of those big games. And then a lot of the big games in 2023, when he was the tight end 7 in average points per game, was with Joe Flacco. Who's going to be his quarterback this year? It won't be Flacco or Winston. Kenny Pickett, I guess. We don't really know. Maybe Shedeur Sanders. But that's just a huge question mark for the Browns in general. Who in the world is going to be the quarterback?
Yeah, if you have the rookie that kind of leans on that tight end, that's good. If you have a veteran who's just not afraid to chuck it up the way that Winston or Flacco did, then it's a good spot. But then if you get the tweener of a Kenny Pickett, not the greatest, it reminds me of the Giants quarterback situation, right, from last year. It's just not super appealing when you're looking at it. And Njoku is really not their number one. I mean, they still have Jerry Jeudy, who's kind of operating as their number one. I mean, what does help Njoku, he's going to be needed a little bit in the passing game, but I think they're going to get a receiving back to help in the short to immediate routes. I think they'll get a true, maybe a slot type to help as well with Jeudy and maybe interchange him with Jeudy a little bit inside and outside. So, again, Njoku, again, flashes with Flacco and Winston. I mean, we've been waiting a long time. He was a first-round pick out of Miami. We thought he was going to be a fantasy factor, but then they kind of used him as an all-round like blocker type. They didn't throw the ball to him all that much. And then the last couple of years really have relied upon him as he gets older. Go figure. So I'm just not interested in Njoku. The situation is very cloudy. I'd much rather have Engram over him and Johnny Smith.
I do think if they end up taking Shedeur Sanders at number 2, I might be a bit more interested in him. If it's Kenny Pickett, no, because they're not going to score anything or any touchdowns. But Elijah Moore, is he still there? He left, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. So I think, yeah, I mean, basically, is Shedeur Sanders going to be there? Then we're going to revisit this Njoku conversation, right? Because he might be the go-to guy for him downfield in some key spots. So I don't know. Kenny Pickett right now, that's why it's so hard to rank these guys, because we don't know who's going to be throwing to them. And no tight end really has been productive based on who their quarterback is, right? So it's really hard to go after Njoku, and they could easily go back to getting another tight end, diversifying this offense, and going more to the receivers. So I'm just not sure, and that's a person I think I would like to avoid once again.
Yeah, I might be in on him. So that's why this is tough to rank, right? Because you're out. I think I'll be in. He had 97 targets, again, with missing a lot of playing time. Third on the team. Elijah Moore is no longer on the team with 102 targets. That's who is right behind. I think he's going to get a ton of targets. And if they do score touchdowns, then David Njoku will be that touchdown guy. But how many touchdowns opportunities will he have?
Right.
That's also a question. That's what also makes it hard to rank him. We have 2 more tight ends to get through that are tough to rank. One of these guys should be easy to rank, where you just have them super low because you have to get over the hype, but it's still hard to get over that hype in Dalton Kincaid. We will discuss to end the show right after a quick break. All right, I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Let's finish up the toughest tight ends to rank for the 2025 fantasy drafts. And our next guy, it's Dalton Kincaid. He's sitting at tight end 12 right now in consensus rankings. Is that too high? Is it too low? Because he was a tight end 22 in points per game in 2024. So massive jump up for him, right? Tight end 14 in 2023 as a rookie, first round pick back in that 2023 draft. He's only 25 years old. He did injure his shoulder in week 6. Didn't miss time for that, but clearly was working through it. And then injured his knee in week 10, missed 3 games, played through that injury the rest of the year. Horrendous production from him. Somehow he still is the second most targeted guy in the Bills, but Josh Allen was spreading the ball around like crazy, and it worked. So I'm sure they'll just keep spreading the ball around. Now, they didn't really add any weapons besides Josh Palmer. Was it the injuries? Can he break out in year 3? Are we being too impatient? Or is his ranking just way too high at tight end 12?
Yeah, the start of his career reminds me a lot of David Njoku, because I thought Njoku was going to come there and be an impactful receiver. Then he was still valuable because he was a good all-around guy and he blocked and all that. Kincaid is actually not a very good blocker. That's why they have Dawson Knox in certain situations. I think that's also hurt Kincaid from staying on the field a little bit, and Knox cutting in to his value here. So it reminds me of that. It's like this weapon has got so much untapped potential that he could really deliver, but they just don't throw to him. They don't feel like he's consistent. Maybe the playoffs can change that a little bit and see that he's a little bit more valuable. But then Khalil Shakir is coming back. Keon Coleman should be on the rise. They're in the market for another receiver here. So I don't know. It's just really hard to say Dalton Kincaid is a top 12 tight end. So again, last year I just started him by default. Like I didn't even look at his numbers, and it was always around 6 to 8. It would always seem to be disappointing, no chance of really scoring. So again, I don't see a lot changing. Nothing changed really here with Joe Brady there and what the Bills are doing. So I'm definitely out on Kincaid. I'm not going to take him as a top 12 tight end.
Yeah, if he starts falling and falling and falling, and if the reviews coming out of training camp are just glowing that he's really taken a step forward, maybe I'll fall into it again. But like, I'd rather take a chance on one of the rookies coming in, and Tyler Warren, or even maybe Colson Loveland, if they end up in a good landing spot. Like, I would just rather that upside than go with Dalton Kincaid again, just because of the hype that he got coming out of school, and because of him playing with Josh Allen. Like, it's not working out. It's not coming to fruition. And it's like taking another shot on Kyle Pitts last year, right? Because of because of what you think he can be, and it didn't work out again. So I don't want to fall into that trap with Kincaid. The last guy that's hard to rank is Jake Ferguson, and maybe it won't be hard for some people, but I think it's pretty hard. He's tight end 15 right now in consensus rankings. It's a terrible year last year for him. Tight end 29 in points per game at just 5.4 points per game, after being the tight end 9 in points per game in 2023. However, he suffered a bone bruise and MCL sprain in week 1, missed week 2, came back very fast, played with Dak Prescott only through week 9 before Prescott got hurt. So he really played 6 full games with Dak Prescott from weeks 3 through 9. In those games, he averaged 8.2 fantasy points per game and 7.8 targets per game and 53 receiving yards per game. Would have been 4th most receiving yards per game by a tight end last year. And that 8.2 points per game puts him right where he was in 2023, where he averaged 8.3 points per game. So it wasn't that far off when he was with Dak Prescott. And he was a second on the Cowboys in targets by a good chunk during that span from weeks 3 through 9. 0 touchdowns though last year. So like, where's the touchdowns at? What do we do with Jake Ferguson?
Yeah, I mean, it does help that Brandon Cooks is gone. It's yet another weapon there. They got to figure out what they're doing with the number 2, if they need to upgrade, or how much they need to upgrade from Jalen Tolbert next to CeeDee Lamb. So there's a void for some key targets there. Luke Schoonmaker came in a little bit while he was hurt and put up okay numbers, but in the end, I think just having that lost connection with Dak Prescott kind of cost Ferguson here. So he's a lot more intriguing on the back end, just because the Cowboys are going to throw to this position a lot more than I can trust as a key target for Dak Prescott. Then I can trust Josh Allen or Dalton Kincaid. I mean, he's got to split with Knox. There's really just Schoonmaker there trying to figure out the rest of this receiving core. I look at this Brian Schottenheimer now led offense, where I think this could be a key target here all over the field, playing off the running game. So, yeah, I think it's a good bounce back potential for Ferguson. We've seen the production there before. While Kincaid is still, the jury's out. Like, we haven't seen it all come together, at least for fantasy, while we have seen that for Ferguson. So I don't mind looking at him as a later flyer here if I'm looking, and a lot of the key starters or people want to pass on, like Njoku or Kincaid, are off the board. I'm going to wait and see if Ferguson's there, because I might say, okay, I can get him and one of those if I have one of those upside tight ends like a Loveland or Warren, then you're like in good position here, right? So we need to see how things play out more. But Loveland, Warren are the guys that I think are easy to rank. If they land in good spots, they're going to be ahead of some of these veterans. But in terms of Kincaid versus Ferguson, I think Ferguson is slightly better value at this point than Kincaid.
Yeah, and when you're really punting the position, because that Jake Ferguson right now is sitting at like tight end 19 in consensus rankings, you can definitely get him probably in the last round this upcoming draft. And I would much rather take a shot on him than a Dallas Goedert, who you know exactly what you're getting, over a Kyle Pitts, who's just been a disaster, over Hunter Henry. Again, you just know like he has no upside. We've at least seen upside from Ferguson, and that's been without touchdowns, right? Like, even that during that time I was talking about last year with Dak Prescott, he had some good games, again, with 0 touchdowns. It's like he gets the targets when he's healthy with Dak Prescott. So as long as he gets those targets, imagine if those touchdowns come in, and there's really no reason they can't. So that's why I would take a shot on Jake Ferguson late if I'm punting the position. Now, hopefully I'm not in that situation where I just completely had to avoid the position because I missed out on the top guys. But if I'm in that scenario, I do think I would be going Jake Ferguson there. But that is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are watching us on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. you're listening to us on a podcast app, give us a review, all that good stuff. That just helps us be here for you every single day, Monday through Friday, helping you in your fantasy football leagues. We will talk to you on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye, y'all.